Alright, this is going to be my live reaction video to Jay's Ramble. ZZ is objectively and measurably worse than CFOP. Really interested in this. Around 10 people actually sent me the link to this video over the course of the day, demanding my opinion. Jay also asked me to do a video myself. I haven't seen the video yet, didn't get around to doing it yet. I'm especially interested in the objectively and measurably worse part because I feel like while ZZ might not be better than CFOP, in many cases, I wouldn't say it's so clear. Like there are a lot of details where it's really debatable how much impact they have on solving and how good or bad they really are, especially since ZZ is very adaptable. Like there are many different variants of ZZ that excel at different things. Okay, so without further talking, let's get started with the video.
What is up, guys? This is going to be a real fun one. Oh boy. So, what's the topic of today? Well, the topic is ZZ no longer being in the big three, declared by yours truly, Jay McNeil. So, why do I think ZZ shouldn't belong in the big three? Well, we're going to dive into that, but before we do, I need to preface this because there are some things that will be taken out of context, and if I can prevent that in any capacity, that is a good thing. So, when I say ZZ does not belong in the big three, I am talking specifically about two-handed solving. If you haven't figured it out by now, all...
Okay, that's just wow. I was expecting so much from this video, and just now we're cutting to only two-handed. That's pretty lame. Like, that's not where ZZ excels at. I'm willing to concede that ZZ might be worse than CFOP. Maybe, probably, for two-handed, but that's not really where the interesting part is. But okay, let's see what he has to say about two-handed.
All of my rambles are about two-handed 3x3 solving because that is what I'm into. That is my thing. So, OH, you know, say what you want about ZZ. I do think it could be comparable to CFOP, but it is still definitely worse than Rue for one-handed. Rue is...
Wait, what? No. ZZ is not like maybe comparable to CFOP. ZZ is just straight out way better than CFOP for one-handed. Like, how does it even compare? And Rue is only much better than both of the two because table abuse exists. If table abuse was forbidden, like ZZ would be undisputable king of one-handed.
I'm pretty sure it's where it's at for one-hand, guys. Sorry to say. And I'm sad about that as well because I'm one-hand solver and I'm not using the best method. So that's a shame. What other events could ZZ be good for? Well, I don't think it's particularly good for FMC because none of the big three are really good for FMC. I think we can all agree.
Well, yeah, but it's still like very good for FMC to know all the methods just so you have some tricks up your sleeve. At least like it doesn't matter whether you do ZZ, CFOP or whatever, but you should be able to do edge orientation. Because for some scrambles for FMC, edge orientation is going to be a really good start. I've seen some really good solutions with edge orientation. And then obviously you should know block building even more than you need for ZZ. So, I mean, you never just use one method for FMC anyway, so whatever.
With that. Multi, no. Three blind as such, no. So there is one event, and I'm not even bullshitting here. You're gonna find this funny, and you're gonna be annoyed about what I'm gonna say. I unironically, legitimately think ZZ is the best method for feet. Alright, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Wait. Okay, that's actually really funny because I've been thinking about that and I've talked to some feed cubers, but I've got like mixed responses and I've done like one feed solve in my life, so I have no clue. I've really no clue how feed works and what's good at feed. I've been thinking about this and this is actually pretty great to hear, but I don't really know why because ZZ doesn't really shine through low move count. Well, I guess it does when you do like really good block building and then ZBLL. And the moveset is probably good for feet, but let's just hear what Jay has to say about it.
Onto the actual video because I do think it's quite funny. So with feet solving, the way I see it, in order to be good at feat solving, I mean, you have to have your turning down, obviously, but that's not too hard. And because you're turning at such a slower pace, things like efficiency become much more important. And because rotations with feet are kind of annoying, then that gives ZZ a bit of a bump. And because of the block building nature of ZZ, you can get some really efficient solutions, usually a little bit better than CFOP, while
Yeah, and that's also why I believe it's better for one-handed. Like, the same thing applies to one-handed, just that you turn a good bit faster, but still like slower than two-handed. Fast enough or slow enough that you can still do proper block building, and you very much prefer no rotations for one-handed, and then you also have some really nice LL stuff that you can do that doesn't really matter as much for two-handed, but for one-handed it does. And yeah, I can see this working for feet as well.
also avoiding rotations. On top of that, with feet, um, I mean, just one look last layer and like being really efficient in general for your last layer becomes a really, really big deal. So because of those three things and because of just like how ZZ works as a whole, I legitimately think ZZ is a lot better for feet than CFOP and Rue will ever be. Isn't that great news for all the ZZ users? Yeah, my method's good for feet. I can't wait to do feet practice because feet's going to be an event. I'm so happy. So yeah, I'm sorry to be the bearer of
Fucking
bad news,
savage.
but unless you're a feet enthusiast, then if you're not a ZZ enthusiast, you probably just shouldn't be using ZZ. So, anyways, point being, everything I'm saying is framed within the context of two-handed solving. If you comment, what about for OH? Well, it's good for OH. I'm gonna have to declare you a silly willy. I'm sorry, I just gotta do it. It's not your fault. It's kind of your fault. Also,
Well, call me a silly
last thing I'll
Willy then.
mention before I get into it, I will not be talking much about Rue in this video. I do believe it is in the top two methods, and I already said I'm convinced it's better for one-handed. I could be convinced it's better for two-handed. I've had controversial opinions in the past where I think Rue is objectively worse for two-handed, but I've seen the fallacy in some of my arguments, so now I'm much more open-minded, unlike with ZZ. Sorry, kids. However, due to a personal lack of knowledge with Rue, I will not be talking about the method as much. That being said, I have no doubt in my mind that a prominent Rue user amongst us could make a similar video to the one I'm making, but instead relating their arguments more to the steps of Rue, whereas I will be relating it to the steps of CFOP, which is probably a little bit easier since ZZ is very closely related to CFOP. And as you'll see later in this video, the best variant of ZZ is in fact CFOP. But
Wait,
I'm basically just saying I would.
the best variant of ZZ is CFOP. Well, I mean, CFOP's not really a ZZ variant because you don't do EO. Or what do you mean? If you mean EO cross, yeah, maybe. Although I think 3/4 cross could be better than pure EO cross still. But oh well.
Like a prominent Rue user to make this kind of video, but in the context of Rue, to add more fuel to the fire. I'm looking at you, Keon. Keon, rhymes with neon. You too, Yuri from Brazil. Who else uses Rue? I don't know. They're probably the only two people I would trust to make this video. I mean, Kevin could. I just don't
Shout out to Yuri.
think he will. Okay, so enough about that. Moving on. So let's talk a little about ZZ. So ZZ is not completely terrible. There are things that I do like about it. So I'm just gonna like list out things that I like about ZZ, and then things that I think are like so-so, and then the things that I think are just quite problematic to say the least. So nice things about ZZ. Uh, Despite what you may think, I actually think EO has some validity as a step. It is, at the very least, an interesting approach to solving the cube. Um, and with things like EO, you open up the opportunity for things like ZBLL, which is why EO tricks in general I think have caught on for CFOP. And the other thing is that last layer is slightly improved because of EO, and it's heavily improved if ZB is implemented. So like using ZB with CFOP, but not forcing ZB every time because that's not smart, I think. Versus using it every time with ZZ. So basically, because of the way ZZ works, you're going to get ZB more than you are going to get it in CFOP, and because of that, your recall will naturally be a little bit better with ZZ, and as such, that kind of buffs ZB for that method. But if you know anything about ZB, you know how little time it saves, if any at all. So it's not a big pro, but it is something, and I have to throw it in there.
Hmm. Um. This is actually an interesting question. Something I wonder a lot about CFOP. Like when people learn full ZBLL and then use CFOP, people like Jabari, though I guess Jabari uses ZB now, so he does always force it. Not sure. But when you learn full ZBLL for CFOP, how do you really go about it? Because I feel like you need to do more than just solve to keep the Alex drilled, even if you get ZBL every solve. It's just like almost 500 Alex to keep these drilled so you can do them at a high TPS and you can perform them basically just as fast as PLLs. You would want to drill them anyway, and you would want to drill the recall in the same way. But then I wonder if it's even worth it for CFOP to do that when you're not even getting them every solve. Um, Not that you couldn't get them just as fast with enough effort, but I wonder if it's worth it. For ZZ, just really don't underestimate how much time that cuts off for me. Ever since I've learned ZBLL and I've gotten a little bit better at the recall, it's cut off easily like 0.4 seconds or maybe 0.5 seconds even. And I'm not even that great. Like my TPS for many cases sucks pretty hard because I haven't spent as much time drilling. I hate drilling, Alex. I love learning them, but I hate drilling them. And then my recall, I guess, is pretty good. At least people say it's pretty good. I haven't really measured it or compared it to anything, but I think it can be much faster than it is right now because I only do like 20 solves a day right now, and then do a little bit of recall drilling, and that's it. And you could get that recall really low, and you can perform the ZBLs basically as fast as PLLs. Maybe a bit slower, but not by much, because many of the ZBL ALEX are also naturally better than PLL ALEX. For example, like vperm, man, that's one of the worst ZBLLs, if you catch my drift. Okay, let's go on.
There and give ZZ credit where it's due, which is not very often, unfortunately. So, things that are kind of so-so about ZZ. RUL block building. So, it can be good, or it can be awkward. Generally, it's awkward. So,
I
the
agree.
reason it's awkward is just to do a switching between like righty turning and then having to like. I mean, I'm doing obnoxious regrips right now. I don't know why I haven't really cubed properly all day. Um, but yeah, switching from RU stuff to LU stuff is generally annoying, and especially with overturning thrown into the mix for block building, it gets pretty ugly fast. Like with block
Over
building, you might have to do something,
overturning?
something like that with like an overturning where basically like the grip you start in will not be the grip you finish in, which is just annoying. And especially if you're switching between right hand and left hand with that happening at the same time, it can get really ugly. Is my point.
I agree. And that's why you don't do block building. Like, the, basically those are 2 points. First of all, you will have those problems where you have to regrip during block building, and then you have to regrip when you switch from one block to the second block. And this is why, first of all, you shouldn't do block building for two-handed, or you should avoid block building unless it's a really good case. Um, it's also why you should start out with a second block, or if you do it like 3/4 cross, you should start with block on the left side. Like you do the cross edge on the left side, and then you insert those two pairs really quick. You can even insert them from a Z rotation angle, like from here. Um, like let's say you do a basic EO. Okay, that was shit. And then you have the cross edge on the left side, and then you can just do the CFOP style. And there's not really that much switching. First of all, a lot of the times you can solve slots on the left side without really having left side turning. Basically, just by doing like when you do a Sun with the left hand, like this. That's not really left hand turning. That's right hand turning with wide turns, you know. So that's not really slower. It's just a question of how you grip and if you practice this. That's usually what I resort to. But I believe if you were to actually practice both handed turning, like also with the second hand would get just as fast for ZZ, and the little regrip you have wouldn't matter as much because, as I will probably explain in the course of the video, there's also still a lot of advantages to ZZ F2L that make this preferable, like having one regrip from one block to the other, to having lots of rotations in CFOP. So that's the one thing. You kind of want to do EO cross anyway, or you want to do 3/4 EO line, start with a left block, and then finish with 2-gen right block. And the regripping from left to right, I don't think that matters as much. Also, there's one other thing where I've tried it in the past, but I haven't really done much with it, and I don't think it's particularly viable, but it's something you can think about. For example, what you could do is just do EO line. You could either build the EO line on the left and then just do RUD. That's originally what I thought ZZ was like, or like when I started experimenting with methods, I thought, hey, why don't you just do EO and this kind of belt thing on the left, and then you do RUD F2L because that's really sexy because I love RUD. And then I found out ZZ exists and they don't really do RUD, so I switched to RUL. And the reason you don't do this, I think, is because obviously you have really bad look ahead on the bot side. Like you have this huge blind spot, I guess, where you can't see anything. This edge, basically like LSE in Ru, where you can't see the bottom edge, you'd have to predict it every time. And then also the corners down here, which sucks. I guess that's why you don't do it, but it would make for a much more ergonomic F2L. And then also what you could do is you could just start with a right block, like this, and then rotate and do another right block, and then you only have RU. This limits your choices, of course, and the first right block is also not completely 2-gen because you might have to get some pieces from the left side over. But it's still going to be mostly right-handed turning. Okay.
So that's the one thing that's like kind of so-so about ZZ. I can't say that RUL block building is always bad. There's going to be some kid from Reddit who comments on how, oh, but what about like this reconstructed solve? It flows really nice here.
Oh God,
And like,
yes.
yeah, I'm sure the stars can align, and I'm sure there's good cases.
Yeah.
But I think it's more interesting and productive to discuss methods in terms of what will generally happen in the solve. So that's the one thing that's like kind of so-so about ZZ. And then the other thing I don't really like is EO line as a step. And this is just from seeing like all the fast ZZ solvers and, you know, actually I'm not going to say that. Yeah, just from seeing ZZ solvers, EO line as a step, it kind of feels slower than CFOP cross, which makes sense.
Well, no shit. A step that has longer moves, more moves, and solves more of the cube is slower than cross. Okay. I mean, yeah.
Because EO it has a lot more like planning involved, and
No.
as such, it can take up a lot more of the 15 seconds of inspection to find
No.
that EO line as opposed to a CFOP cross.
No, what?
Which I mean makes sense. But then when you realize that that step is slower, then in order for
No.
ZZ to probably be worth it, like taking LL out of account because it's such a small part of the solve at the high level, or I shouldn't necessarily say that. I just mean small in terms of time. But
No. That's not the problem. Like, I agree that EO line as a step is really a problem for ZZ, but that's not the reason for it. For example, EO doesn't really take much planning. You can see EO in like half a second. And then you can also plan the solve of the EO in the same time. Like, you see the EO and you know the solve. It's not that many cases. It basically becomes algorithmic after a while. Like, I see, wait, let's scramble again. Yep, I see this immediately, and that's EO. And you learn to plan in the line really quickly as well. The problem with EO line is that there is kind of a threshold, right? Where CFOP solving the first 4 cross edges is basically like block building. You just solve the edges. There's nothing to think about. And then if you want to plan further ahead into the first or second pair, you just have to not think about the cross edges as cross edges, but you have to think about them as parts of an F2L block. And then you want to combine the edges with a corner and a pair, or maybe you do it one after the other, depending on what's better. this is the part where it becomes really difficult for ZZ because when you plan an entire EO line, first of all, it's always like one move more, which of course makes it harder. And then it becomes really hard to track corners through EO line. So tracking edges and predicting where they end up and doing like a belt or an EO cross, that's really easy. Like planning an entire EO cross, no problem. But if you want to plan a corner with it and make like a block, that's where it becomes really hard. And I know myself that I'm pretty bad at this. I can't really reliably plan cross plus one in CFOP, um, but I find it much harder in ZZ even. And I believe this could possibly be done. Um, like I'm pretty sure if you put in the work, you could possibly plan EO line plus one, meaning like the EO line itself, and then one by two block every time. But I haven't put in the time, and I feel like I'm really bad at this, and I'm just focusing on other stuff. But that's really the problem. Like you will never be able to plan like half an F2L in inspection for ZZ. So you rely on having a really good EO line to F2L transition. You rely on maybe not just doing EO line, but doing EO cross, which I already mentioned. Um, and then you just have to look ahead. But I think yeah, this is one of the biggest problems for ZZ, but for different reasons.
When you're comparing the fact that EO line is probably slower than cross, then RUL block building has to be faster than F12, and I just don't think it is.
No, it isn't.
So with that,
No, it isn't, and that's why you do EO cross. Like doing the EO cross is only very marginally slower than a cross, and then you have so much better F2L that you can spam for the 4 slots. Like it's CFOP style F2L, but it's so much better. That's why you don't do block building.
that segue, we're going to move on to the things that I think are quite unfortunate, bad, terrible with ZZ. So, like I said, after EO line, which is arguably slower than cross, you can show me exceptions to the rule. It doesn't negate the rule. You have one thing in particular is you have really nasty blind spots. Like with F2L, like your bad blind spots are like these. I mean, if you're a righty dominant solver, like these
And again, these blind spots. Well, actually, I listened to him.
this is like a half blind spot. This is like a total blind spot. This pair, and then everything else,
Right.
these four cross edges, it's all Gucci. With ZZ, again, you will have partial blind spot there, bit more of a blind spot over here, and especially back here. But you'll also have a blind spot here and here. So you're looking like this, and you've got blind spots on the bottom face.
Yeah. Well, again, you only have the blind spots on the bottom face if you do actually use block building, which I believe is bad. And then if you do EO cross and you look at the cube from like this angle or from this angle, the only blind spot you really have, because everything else can be seen and predicted easily, is like one slot in the back, and that's just not a problem. That's easy to deal with, just like the LSE edge down here and back slots in CFOP.
So I don't know if anyone's ever tried solving a 4x4 with reduction after learning Yao, but having a look on the D face, it gets bad real quick, yo. It's not good stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I can't even do that.
Like I said before, because
Like I can't even solve with reduction anymore. How does that even work? I've literally forgotten how to do it.
cross is probably faster than EO line, the block building would have to be faster than F12. And just so people know, in case you haven't been watching top CFOP solvers recently, the top dudes, they're doing sub 4 F2L including cross. I really, really, really don't see the same level of potential in block building. I just don't see it.
Me
I
neither.
don't think EO line plus the RUL block building, the way ZZ was intended to be done by Mr. ZZ, I just don't think it can get to that level.
I agree.
And it needs to be able to get to that level for the LL argument to have any weight whatsoever. Another thing that's kind of annoying.
Well, no. No. It doesn't need to get to that level. It can be a little bit slower because ZBLL is just faster. I mean, if we're getting to a point where we're saying hypothetically, EOLine plus RUL block building is exactly as fast as CFOP, cross, and F2L, you immediately concede that ZZ is better because ZBLL is just better. But I mean, it's not the case, so whatever.
And just like generally terrible about ZZ is because block building has more quote unquote cases, and when I say cases, I mean there's just more like variants to the situations you'll encounter when you're trying to solve blocks. Automation of solutions, automation of how you solve cases, it becomes a huge issue, especially for things like look ahead and keeping your TPS up. Because if you got all these cases, I don't think it's realistic for someone to learn block building in a truly algorithmic manner.
No, and that's why you do EO cross. Like that's what makes EO cross better than block building, and what makes it potentially just as good or better than CFOP because you have fewer cases. You have even fewer cases than CFOP F2L, and you can do so much stuff. Like you, the best thing that I like to tell people is, let's say you have, um, wait, let's say you have these front slots, and these could be your last slots, doesn't really matter. Let's say you have these front slots, like one edge solved and one corner solved. Um, for CFOP, it would be kind of hard to think about like how to solve these with a keyhole kind of case and save moves, because you'd have to find these two edges. You'd have to figure out how the edge is in related to the corner, like how it has to be, and which F2L case you're actually looking at. For ZZ, you only have one case that it could be, like because the edge is oriented, it only has there's only one possibility. So you just have to find the two pieces, and then you D, and then you do the one case that it can be, and it's super easy. And that's something I actually do a lot in solves. And I don't know, this I feel like this gets completely overlooked. Like the ease in which you can do keyhole in ZZ is super good. And then of course you just have fewer cases for F2L, uh, much fewer really horrible cases where you would want to do a rotation in CFOP or some weird algorithm. You have some bad cases that are worse in ZZ than in CFOP because you want to preserve the edge orientation. Like for example, wait, what do we have? No, that's not really worse. Well, there are some cases that are worse in ZZ, of course. Um, But in general, just being able to spam one side with two gen algorithms is really good. And I don't know. I think it's better, but I could be wrong because I've only spent a couple of months with CFOP back when I started. Um, but I think this really makes a huge difference. And also, what can't be overlooked is in ZZ, when you have only one color scheme or maybe two color schemes and you've learned them both, uh, you don't have to like put the pair in the right slot at all. Or well, you have to put it in the right slot, but it's never an issue to think about which the right slot is. You never have to look at the slot. You never have to look at which way you've turned the cube and which slot you have to insert it to. You just see the pair and you insert it, and then you can already look ahead. This is probably only very, very marginally better, but it is something that should be noted. Like it just makes look ahead easier, and I can feel this every time I go back to CFOP. I notice it's hard to look ahead.
And because of that, look ahead is just naturally going to be a bit worse than it would be with CFOP because it just becomes that much harder for you to
Yeah,
do look ahead, like I described in my 99% of look ahead videos suck ramble, which you should definitely check out. It's a good video. But yeah, basically you see pieces, and when you're looking ahead, you want to see those pieces, and you want to be able to like draw your attention to something else and solve them without even thinking about it. Just have muscle memory take over. Good luck getting muscle memory to take over with block building. I don't know if the Rogue users can really do it that well, and despite that, they're still competing with CFOP. So there you go.
and I think that's the only
So that
reason. I think that's the only reason why Rue hasn't like completely taken over the 3x3 ranks yet. You could see this back when Alexander Lau became really good with Rue. He still didn't have great TPS during FTL. He had like super, super low move counts and really sexy solves. Good look ahead, but he didn't have the look ahead at the same amount of TPS as comparable CFOP solvers. because it's really just harder to do with block building. And maybe this is just a question of optimization, and it's the point where Ru or other block building methods may just have a higher like a higher skill ceiling than CFOP has, because at this point CFOP is limited by TPS, right? Because if you can look ahead with 10 TPS, that's great. If you can look ahead with 10 TPS for Ru with block building, which is much harder to do, then you will be better than CFOP because it's just lower move count. And this is something where this is one of the details where I'd say it's very debatable, right? Because we just don't know yet. We're not at that point yet. You could say, yeah, but it's impossible. It's impossible to get this look ahead with a block building method. Or you could say it's possible, and that's why the block building methods are better, because they have a higher skill ceiling, and you can potentially be much faster. And I'm not really sure, but I think for ZZ especially, the LUR block building for two-handed is pretty awkward. So right now I would very much prefer the EO cross. For Ru, that's a different story because you have much more, like you abuse the freedom of block building much more by not doing EO before, and you get really, really low move counts through that. And it's really where Ru shines, whereas for ZZ, the move count isn't really, it's not really the greatest thing that speaks for ZZ. Like, I know this has been an argument in the past, and people have said, yeah, but ZZ is just more move optimal than CFOP, but honestly, if you look at two-handed ZZ solves that don't use CBLL and don't use perfect block building, it's it's just not better than CFOP. It's a little bit worse, in fact, most of the time. And it's only comparable because of no rotations. And when you do EO cross and ZBLL, it's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same as CFOP, maybe a bit less, because you do actually save a lot of moves from just having one look last layer. But then again, like for CFOP, you could also do lots of tricks to reduce the move count a bit. So it's comparable, and it really only shines through no rotations and really good spammable F2L.
That causes issues, and then there's also TPS because if you really want to try and let muscle memory take over and have that look ahead mindset, you're almost definitely going to have to sacrifice TPS. Like the no,
And that's why ZZ is great. That's why you do EO cross, and that's why the ZZ F2L is so fucking great, because you have only this handful of F2L cases, and you can just spam them so hard. You don't have to regrip, you don't have to rotate. It's actually beautiful. And like this trade-off Jay talks about, again, there might be a trade-off, or it's just a trade-off if you're not good enough, because there's a limit uh, for TPS, but there might be a much higher limit for the look ahead. So you could potentially sustain high TPS for everything you do. But again, not sure.
no matter what, it's either going to be look ahead or TPS. There has to be some sort of sacrifice made. So that's the thing that's pretty sucky about ZZ in my opinion. The last thing I don't really like about ZZ, or second last I should say, I've got the big one saved for last. Because you can't really rotate, or at least you traditionally shouldn't rotate with ZZ, because that's the point of the method. Because, rotations are so slow, they're just so hard to do. Like, I just don't know how to do them, man. They're just really hard and take up so much time. But yeah, because of that, your fate is mostly determined for you in the sense that if you have to end with like a crappy thing in the back left slot, unless you're willing to do a Y2, then that's just kind of how you got to deal with it. The only other
Right.
exception to this rule is when you have so let's just say we're doing orange on front ZZ, and then this is our last pair, and we don't know how to do commutators because we suck at cubing.
Okay. So like the back left slot is arguably the worst slot for last slot case to be in. I'll give you that, but then again, there aren't that many crappy cases for ZZ. Like even the worst cases that you could have in the left back slot aren't that bad. You could still spam them really fast. Like what's one of the worst cases? Like when you have wait, yeah, this one. Like this one's pretty bad, right? You all know this case. If you have it in the back left slot, you just do this, and it's still really fast. I don't know. And again, ideally you want to start on the left side because then you have the right slot, the right back slot, which is better if you're a right-hander and your hands aren't like exactly as fast, or if you do the wide turn left block thing I talked about. Um, and then also he says, yeah, but you can't do rotations. Yeah, you can. Of course you shouldn't because that's how ZZ was meant to be. But I mean, I don't have Zbigniew Sporowski standing behind me, like whipping me every time I do a rotation. And in fact, I do this all the time. Like, let's say you have this case. This is really bad. Like, you could do this with a wide turn thing. Wait, did you guys see it? Okay, like this. This on the left side. You could do it like this with a wide turn solution where you don't really have left side turning, where you don't really move your hand from the cube holding position. But it's really not that great. So what I do is rotate, just do the standard insert, and it's much faster. And because it's the last slot, first of all, it doesn't matter because the edge is solved. And then you don't have to rotate back either because you just do ZBLL and you're done. Now, if you have this case, of course, you can't really do that because you'd have to do this, and then you have some shitty LL case that, yeah, well, some CFOP stuff. But for these cases, you can and you should do the rotations because they're actually much better.
And spend too much time on Reddit. Because you have the edge solved, when you have an edge solved, or even an edge in like... Actually, what's easy, it's just whenever an edge is in another slot. So if you've got an edge in another slot like that, or like that, then you can rotate, and you can finish the solve as technically rotationless, but you did throw a rotation in there.
And you should.
So that is like an efficiency that could be added to ZZ. However, that would only work when you've already... Basically, there can't be any edges in the U layer that belong in F12, otherwise a rotation will unorient it. However, I don't think this is an efficiency ZZ users are willing to use because they think rotationless solving is like God to them or something.
Well, then they're stupid.
And the real last thing that I really don't like about ZZ, good luck being color neutral with any ZZ variant whatsoever. Color neutrality is a big deal. I'm sorry.
But why though?
Sorry, it just is. Maybe not for Rue, because, you know, Rue's special and it's got all these crazy advantages. ZZ, yeah. So, before we move on a bit further, I want to first touch on a bit of the historical context of the Big Three.
Wait, that's it? That's all he's going to say to color neutrality? I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like, it makes for a shorter cross every time, and you can always like select the color where you do some fancy block building free fob stuff, like Felix usually does, and you can like look ahead a good bit further. But again, that's made up by ZZ having really spammable F2L. And one thing you can actually do with ZZ, of course, it doesn't make sense to become like 6-side neutral for all the orientations, but that doesn't really make sense. So usually you can have like 0 to 12 bad edges, and when you look at your main orientation with orange font and you see like, oh no, this is 6, 10, or 12 bad edges, which are pretty bad cases, you can just check the Y prime rotated rotation, which you should learn. Like, this is the amount of color neutrality I personally recommend for ZZ, and it will probably have a different amount of bad edges. And it's actually really easy to plan EO line or even EO cross for 2 orientations within those 15 seconds. Again, I'm really not that great at planning, and even I can do it. This basically eliminates all the really bad EO lines that you could get, and it always gets you a decent start, and then again the really nice F2L. People have also argued that you should consider like Z2 neutrality, so you have a different line that you could start with when the line pieces are weird, but I wouldn't recommend it for reasons. Um, Basically, because then the colors of the usual slots change really hard, and that's just really confusing when you have it Z2 rotated because it's basically mirrored. It's not that hard when you could just go Y prime because it's a completely different orientation and completely different slots.
Three methods. So basically, how long these methods have been known, how long they've been in circulation online, and how long we've had prominent people using these methods. So we'll talk about CFOP. It has the longest history by far. Eric Ackersdyke actually informed me a little earlier that it goes back to as early as 1981, although back then they were using CLL and ELL instead of OLL and PLL. But other than that, cross and F12 were already an established method. So that method, CFOP, maybe the best method, but that method is nearly twice my age. So I'm 20 and CFOP is 38. That kind of blew my mind, honestly. It's nearly twice my age. Like, what the hell? That's kind of messed up. But yeah, so CFOP, I don't think I need to convince people that it's by far the most explored and developed and pushed method in the cubing meta. Um, I feel like that kind of speaks for itself. Um, Now for Rue, I'll talk a little bit about Rue. So it originated around about 2004. Um, Mr. Rue from France, he posted like a website with the method. I think he uploaded some solves. And it did catch on. It's obviously not as popular as CFOP, but I don't think it's unpopular to the point where there's something untapped with the method that's going to like really change everything. I think it's been in circulation long enough, just like CFOP has, that we have like a 99.9% idea of like what high level Rue probably looks like. Um, Although we'll have a ramble on that in the future, hopefully, about my thoughts on where Rue could head based on where CFOP is heading in terms of things like option select, which I don't think I've even talked about on this channel. Option select ramble coming soon, apparently. But yeah, that's like the history of Rue. And then ZZ, it's a little bit younger than Rue, not by that much. So the method website was published by Mr. ZZ in like 2006. So that means it's been online for over a decade. And then there was also a Polish cuber who posted a thread on, pardon me, Polish speed cubing forum of some description that I think helped popularize the method more than it already had been. So if we count the start of ZZ as 2008 instead of 2006, it has still been in circulation for a decade, and we have had semi-prominent cubers using the method, or at the very least we've seen people using the method and, getting sub 10-ish. So, like with Rue and like with CFOP, maybe to a slightly lesser extent, but nonetheless, it has been in circulation long enough that there is a very good chance that we know, I'd say like at least 90% of like what ZZ is capable of, and I really just doubt there's any like untapped thing that we just haven't figured out is like really, really fast.
I disagree. I disagree a lot because, first of all, I don't think it's been in circulation long enough. I think it's just not caught on as much as you might think. Like, there's still there have been polls years ago about the distribution of the solvers on the three methods, and these polls are still here today. And now Rue has like a slightly bigger part, and it's like, I don't know what the last poll was that I saw in speed solving or on Facebook, basically in different places, and it's always like CFOP 80 or 90%, and then most of the rest is Rue, and then like CZ is like even much more unpopular than Rue. Like maybe not in Germany because we actually have like quite a few of ZZ solvers and only like one Rue solver in the entirety of Germany, but worldwide ZZ is just much more unpopular than Rue. So there is really just such a tiny sample of ZZ solvers, and like from what I know personally, like I'm just barely like sub 9 right now with two-handed ZZ, and I'm really fucking garbage. I'm so bad. I barely put in any work. I'm sure you could easily be sub 8, and you could probably be sub 7 globally with ZZ. If you just put in the work and just use standard EO Cross CBLL, no problem. And in fact, there's this one Korean guy who has been using EO Cross a few years ago already, I think, and has been getting really good times, like in the 6-7 range. But obviously his main method was CFOP, so I think he just decided by scramble sometimes to do ZZ. Not sure how he really went about it. And even back then with EO Cross and actually not full ZBLL, but a two-step last layer method, he would get 7 times, 7 seconds times, and sometimes even 6 seconds times. So yeah, that shit is definitely possible. I don't know what you're talking about.
Alright, so that's a mouthful already. Now we're going to talk about what I think the best variant of ZZ is. And where is this coming from for me? Well, it's coming from Anecdote. And you know why? Because ZZ's been
Ooh.
around long enough that we've had enough fast people trying to use the method that I think using anecdotal evidence is somewhat appropriate here. So who's in the context of two-handed, sorry Phil you, who is the person that has taken ZZ the fastest in competition?
Andy Huang, right?
Well, funnily enough,
No,
it is
the
a
Korean
Korean
guy.
Cuba, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. I'm very sorry. I believe it's Haeyeon Kyo Kyung. Yeah, that's terrible. So
Yep.
he's third in
Same though.
he's third in Korea for 3x3 average. He's only been to 12 competitions. He doesn't really get to compete. According to this, he's only competed once in 2018, which is very unfortunate because he's a very good Cuba. I wish more people knew about him. Because in the context of this ZZ discussion, he actually is like legitimately more influential than I would say everyone except Phil Yu, honestly. Like him and Phil Yu are like the only two people who have done like anything for this method whatsoever beyond like the Stone Ages, honestly. So shout outs to those guys, you know.
Well, I mean, like there have been a lot of people on the speed solving forums discussing the method and developing the method, like Matt DiPalma back in the day, and then Porkinator. I don't know who that was in real life again, and a few others who have like proposed lots of variants and have discussed a lot about the optimal steps and the last layer methods that there are for ZB, for ZZ, and I think those actually deserve a lot of credit as well. And we haven't really had many people who actually put in the work and who were talented enough to get ZZ really, really fast. Not to take away from anyone here, but I know for a fact that I've been using ZZ for a long time, and I really just haven't put in the effort. And just I can just think that this is the same for the other people who tried ZZ, because I feel like there's just so much potential. I could be so much faster if I just practice like my turning and look at a bit more.
Good on you guys. Um, so yeah, what variant of ZZ does Hayo Kyung? I'll just call him Hayon from now. I'm not going to disrespect his name any further. So what variant does he use? Well, funnily enough, he is mainly a CFOP solver. He has an interest in one-handed, which I believe was why he got into a bit of ZZ. I believe I read a comment on YouTube years ago that said he learned ZZ to practice TPS because having no rotations was a good way to improve his TPS for him. And if you've seen any of his videos, like the dude is like, I legitimately think he might be like the fastest turner, like period. It's hard to tell because of the crappy video quality he has for his videos, but the dude can turn. He can turn. Like, goddamn, he can turn. But anyways, what variant does Hayon use? Well, he uses EO Cross. Yay! Much more basic than block building, but more effective.
Hooray for EO Cross!
Ain't that great? Ain't that more good news? Just like knowing your method is good for feet. So yeah, he's used both. So that's most of what you need to know about this guy. He also has held the ASR average back in 2015, which he got with CFOP and not ZZ, because ZZ can't really get records anymore. Yeah, and I believe the fastest official average he's gotten with ZZ EO Cross variant is about low 8. And I believe his official single was done with EO Cross at 5.91, which is...
Has he actually done full averages with just ZZ EO Cross? I've heard he just like mixes it up. or at least he used to. And I've also read a comment somewhere that he was thinking about learning actual block building and then switching to ZZ with actual block building, but I don't think he's ever done it. And he probably just uses CFOP now. Not sure.
Is, I believe, the fastest ZZ variant solved by far, officially. And I assume his low 8 averages are better than anything else anyone has done, because if someone was getting sub 8 with ZZ, I swear to God we would have heard about it by now.
Yeah, probably.
Surely they're not in the shadows. Surely. If they're getting official sub 8s, we should have heard about them. So, yeah, that's pretty much where I'm coming from. Yeah. And I want to reiterate this again because I know someone on Reddit is gonna come in here with his pitchfork. Again, because of how long ZZ has been around, it's been around for a decade at least. It's been known. It's been used by speedcubers. I think we have sufficient reason to accept the anecdotal evidence that EO Cross is the best proven way to do ZZ. I really, really, really have little reason to believe there's a breakthrough we've somehow missed. And you know what? I'm going to entertain this idea because I'm that nice. Even if, hypothetically, there is a breakthrough we have all missed somehow, it doesn't
Missing
exist
link. You know, back in the day, you talk about the missing link with ZZ because originally the idea with ZZ was that you would do EO line, and then while solving the second, like the left block, you would also do the corner permutation. So you would have like a complete 2-gen finish that would be like either just right block and 2 GLL, or like a small block and then like the last slot and last layer in one step. But this missing link, which was the way to solve corner permutation while solving the left block, to set up for this 2-gen thing. To do this in an efficient way and to recognize this, there was just nothing ever found. And this is actually something where I think Porkinator has made some pretty nice suggestions for variants, and there are actually systems to recognize corner permutation while solving the left block without spending too many moves on setup. And then like all you have to do to solve the corner permutation is like either this, which is like half a Nicholas, or this, which is the same move count, and then you have like complete 2-gen, and it's actually really crazy, but a huge problem recognition wise. So that would be like the huge breakthrough, but that's never coming. I don't think that's just I think that's just not possible because we have like really good methods to recognize the CP on the right, and it's just a matter of like what information do you need and how can you make it visible quickly, and how well can you practice this so it becomes reliable. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be that much of a breakthrough. I think just doing ZBLL for last layer is nice and it's good enough. And if there is going to be a breakthrough, it's just going to be one cuber learning to plan ahead really well from the EO line, which I think is possible, and then just having lots of TPS so you can spam the F2L and learn full ZBLL, and boom, you're probably sub 7.
It doesn't exist, and there's really no point whatsoever trying to compare CFOP and RU to a non-existent method. That is not a productive discussion.
Fucking
So
rude,
I'm going
yo.
to go ahead and say that EO Cross is the best known variant for ZZ. It's not exciting, it's not glitzy, but it gets you fast times, and that might be what you care about more. Look at my last ramble about mindset and practice. So, now that we have that established, it then becomes a kind of simple question because we've now reduced ZZ to effectively EO Cross. It becomes a very simple question when we're comparing ZZ to CFOP. Don't know how it compares to RU. Someone else can make this video for RU. Please, Keon. Please, Yuri. Someone. It becomes an easy question in regards to CFOP versus ZZ, though. Is doing EO before the cross better than doing partial EO before the cross, or doing no EO before the cross? Those are the three options. So you can do full EO where before your cross or / during your cross, you orient all your edges, so rotationless F2L and ZB last layer is available to you. The other option is just orienting your F2L edges, and you would still do CFOP last layer, but you would have rotationless F2L. And then there's the last option of no EO whatsoever. You can't just isolate last late EO but not F12 EO because the rotations and inserts will just mess those edges up. So that's not a real variant. It's either full EO cross, partial EO cross, so basically rotationless F2L cross, we should say, and no
That's
EO
horrible.
whatsoever. So we'll go through
Partial
the
is
steps of
fucking
CFOP
horrible.
one by one, starting with cross, then a little bit onto F2L, and then finally a little bit on LL, because it really doesn't take long to prove that ZZ is worse than CFOP. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I'm not sorry. Cross, in my opinion, with either partial EO or full EO, the fact that you have to do EO without a doubt makes executing and planning your cross slower because there is more information that you have to take into account. So why is this problematic? Well, in my opinion, this is problematic because inspecting first pair in CFOP, in my opinion, is one of those fundamental skills that can basically take you to the next level in terms of cubing. I've seen it happen so many times with my clients where I've gotten them to go from just planning cross to planning first pair and then they just like drop a second. Not like a whole second, but like they like get to that next like barrier just because of that. So I'm a very strong believer of planning first pair and cross and inspection being a very, very, very important thing.
Yep, and I agree. And I feel like this barrier is a lot harder in ZZ, but it might get you even further. Like this is kind of the part that has to be proven by someone who's willing to put in the work, and it just hasn't been done.
And a very important fundamental of CFOP. Trying to plan first pair when you're also planning EO, whether it be partial or full, this is going to restrict the options you have in terms of what pair you can choose because you have to do the EO. You just can't. It's got to be done. It's the method. So you gotta plan a first pair that is slightly more restricted. And I don't know if you've ever tried planning first pair yourself with just CFOP. It is difficult. There is a lot of nuance and crap you have to deal with planning first pair. It can be a pain. So having that added restriction in terms of what you can even do to plan the first pair, I think is quite problematic. And then even that aside, because you're planning partial or full EO, you're going to have less time during your inspection. It may not be more than a couple seconds, but when it's 15 seconds, a couple seconds, that's like at least like, 10%-ish. 3 seconds is, I'm not going to try to do math here. I haven't done math in years. I just do cubes. But yeah, those two factors are the main things that make cross a bit problematic with EO cross or partial EO cross. Restriction and less time that you can dedicate to finding that first pair to begin with. So let's move on to F2L. F2L. So with both of these methods, whether
Hmm. Like I feel like this is an interesting question. I wonder, would it be possible in 15 seconds of inspection time to check for the better orientation out of two orientations, and then plan EO line plus one, which to me means EO line and a 1x2x2 block. Um, I think it would, because like planning EO line just doesn't take more than 5 seconds ever. Um, and then it just depends on how hard it is to actually plan the block. I have done this before, I have practiced this, but I haven't put in the work to actually get it like under 15 seconds. I've been able to do this in under a minute consistently, but I've only done like 50 solves or something on train journeys. But yeah, this is what has to be proven, and I think it's possible.
it be EO cross or partial EO cross, it's rotationless F2L. That's like the main benefit you're getting. That's kind of why we're doing it. That's the rationale. And this is going to annoy people, especially people on Reddit. But screw it. Rotationless F2L. It's been talked about as long as CFOP has existed. And how long has CFOP existed? Nearly 4 decades. Needless to say, there's a reason it has never caught on at the top level. And I assure you it has nothing to do with Felix or others not being smart enough to realize that PubeCuber420 on the RCuber subreddit was
Yeah,
right all along.
it's just because
Rotational
rotations just aren't that bad. That's why ZZ becomes very relevant when you talk about one-handed and other stuff. And you could make it work for two-handed, probably. I think it could be as fast as CFOP, why not? But that's not why you use ZZ. Because like CFOP is easy mode. You don't have to do anything for CFOP. You don't have to learn ZBLL, and you can still be pretty fast. Well, you would probably be faster learning ZBLL, and that's something I will actually talk about in a minute as well. But yeah, rotations aren't bad. Like, rotations aren't your enemies, not for two-handed. For one-handed, yeah, definitely. At least the Y rotations and the X rotations, definitely. And for feet, probably. I don't know, but not for two-handed. So that's not the strength of ZZ for two-handed. The strength of ZZ for two-handed is the ease of look ahead, the few cases, the spammable algorithms, and the great last layer.
Towards F2L is super overrated. Rotations have benefits, and rotations are not hard to do quickly. On to last layer. And the only comparison I think we need to make here is with full EO cross, because I think by this point we've already proven that partial EO cross is just not worth it, because the cross becomes worse and the F2L becomes worse, and the LL is the same as CFOP. So it's worse. So partial EO cross is worse than CFOP. What about full EO cross?
Yes.
Well, in my opinion, in my humble opinion,
In your humble, objectively measurable opinion, really?
the only way EO has a chance of winning, EO cross rather, is with ZB. And this is going back to what I said earlier in the video. So for the 99% of ZZ users who picked up ZZ for the sole reason to avoid learning full OLL, this argument will fall flat on its face, and now you know that CFOP is what you should be doing to get the fastest.
Wait, are we talking about ZBLL? Because, yeah, that's fucking stupid. Why the fuck would you learn ZZ if your goal isn't to learn ZBLL? Like, what's the point? What's actually the point? And don't come at me with ZZCT, because ZZCT is bullshit. It's just bad. Like, anything you do with ZZ, your goal should always be to learn ZBL, and do it earlier. Do it sooner rather than later, because the sooner you learn it, the sooner you get the recognition up and you can drill your algs, and it's just not that hard.
Times for you. With full ZB, however, I will concede, like I did earlier, that due to getting ZB on a comparatively more infrequent basis with CFOP than you would with ZZ or EO Cross, although we don't really need to talk about ZZ anymore because we know it's worse than EO Cross, ZB becomes slightly faster when using EO Cross because you get it more on a more frequent basis, you have more chances to recall things, and you can just strengthen that muscle quicker and also to a higher level, in my opinion. I think it does actually raise the ceiling on ZB.
Okay, I guess here's the right spot to talk about what I mentioned. So I believe that ZZ with EO Cross or 3/4 EO Cross and then ZBLL is probably the best thing for ZZ, unless we're assuming there's like a high skill ceiling to look ahead with block building, and we're assuming that you can actually plan EO line +1 reliably in inspection, in which case like block building would stand a chance. But if that's not the case, then 3/4 EO cross or EO cross and ZBL, which will be the best method or the best variant of ZZ. And I think that can actually be as good as CFOP right now because of what I said earlier. Now, if we consider that there are people out there right now learning the algorithms for one look last layer for CFOP, that's a whole different argument. Because if that ends up becoming viable, and I think it can, it's just like in a perfect world, in an ideal world where like CFOP would be a huge sport, like talents would get developed at really young ages with coaches and stuff, and they would put in endless hours and they would learn huge alg sets really early. That could be standard. Like you could just say, yeah, CFOP and one look last layer. I don't think that's unrealistic. I think it's possible to drill the recall so it's fast. I mean, we learn languages with like huge amounts of words and grammatical constructs that also have to be recalled and used really quickly. I don't think that's a problem to do. And then drilling the algs to all be really fast and to execute them with high TPS, that's just a matter of how many hours you actually put in to drilling those algs and not just spamming solves each day. And if that's a thing, if that becomes a thing, where CFOP and one look last layer is standard for high level solving, then there's just no chance. There's no competition. Like CFOP will be straight out better than ZZ. No questions asked, because obviously you just don't have that worse last layer anymore. And it actually does make a huge difference. Again, don't underestimate the difference one step in last layer makes, or even just a few moves in last layer, whatever.
But at the end of the day, we're talking about ZB here. ZB, guys, ZB. We're talking about less than a second here, in my honest opinion. As such, since the problems I mentioned before almost definitely outweigh the like half a second you might save with ZB, ZZ, whether it be EO cross, partial EO cross, proper ZB, proper ZZ with like the block building EO, the weird phasing thing where you force like half the ZBs, which aren't even the better ZBs generally. ZZ has to be objectively worse than CFOP, thus reducing the big three down to the big two. Woo! So now it becomes a much more interesting discussion, in my opinion. What's better between Ru and CFOP? I think that's a pretty interesting discussion because they are very, very different methods, and I think it's very hard to quantify and compare the steps effectively. I know Keon has a presentation on it, and I think it's like the best one there is, but I don't know, it really takes... I feel like it's going to take someone who's gotten to a high level with CFOP and also Ru to really present like any super good intellectual argument. But nonetheless, I would really appreciate it if a high level Ru solver made basically the video I just made, but with more of a like Ru framework and comparing the steps of Ru to ZZ. I think the main comparison that would be made is the fact that both methods are rotationless and have a large 2-gen aspect to them, although Ru more than ZZ. So yep, that's my argument as to why I believe ZZ is without a doubt worse than CFOP. It could be a bit more comparable for one-handed, but I don't know how much better it would be. I would still think EO Cross is the best variant there. And now that I think about it, if you got ZB on lock,
for one-handed,
EO
no.
Cross, ZZ.
For one-handed, it doesn't matter as much because the moves, like the repeated RRR moves you can get in block building, like you don't have to. Where for two-handed you have these triggers where you don't want to regrip, and if you have to do like stuff like this, that's awkward, of course. But it's not as awkward for one-handed because it just doesn't matter as much to get these sexy triggers, because stuff like this can also be good. That's the one thing, and then also you turn slower though, so you have time to abuse the block building cases and the cool tricks you can do. So I wouldn't say EO Cross is better for one-handed. I personally use block building right now, and I've practiced both a fair bit. Maybe you have like if you have like really high TPS for one-handed, it could be the case that EO Cross is better, but I'm really not that sure. And even then, I still think it's much better than CFOP for one-handed.
It's probably better than CFOP. Actually, I'm pretty sure it is. So then between Ru, ZZ, and CFOP, assuming you learn ZB, and you do EO cross ZZ instead of trying to block build, although I guess block building is a bit easier to finger trick one-handed than it is two-handed, so I don't know. But I mean, ZB's got to be in the mix. CFOP might be like the third best OH method, which is kind of an interesting tidbit. So I guess there's the that.
Third best.
But again, this is all framed in the two-handed context, and I think in the context of two-handed, it's the big two. It's Ru and CFOP, and the only way ZZ gets thrown into the mix is with feet. And once again, feet's going, guys. It's long gone. Well, it's not long gone, but it's gonna be.
Rest in pepperoni's feet.
Yeah, it's just kind of the big two now, guys. I'm sorry. That's it for this ramble. I hope you enjoyed. Please don't cry.
I might. I just might cry a little bit, like tiny little tear. Well, I guess that's it from me then. I do agree with a lot of points. I do think EO Cross is the best variant, at least at the moment. You should be learning ZBLL no matter what when you do ZZ, otherwise you're just doing the method wrong. I believe that the cons Jay has listed here, like most of them exist, but I don't think they're as bad as he makes them out to be. And he also ignores some of the pros, like having that really spammable F2L of EO cross and like fewer cases, the really easy to do keyhole cases that of course aren't going to be there every solve but can be abused, and I get them in like I guess 1 out of 5 or 10 solves, so that's pretty good. Um, and then also the pros that not being color neutral and having actually having one fixed orientation, um, the advantages of that, because I feel like a lot of people always only see the pros of being color neutral, and then the question of can you actually learn to be color neutral if you haven't been. But I feel like people just ignore that there are also advantages to limiting yourself when it comes to solving on which color, just like it is advantageous to limit your moveset, to limit your possible F2L cases, as Jay admits himself. It can be an advantage, and I think in the case for ZZ, ZZ is really based on reducing your moveset, reducing the amount of cases, and reducing the amount of possible colors, and that's really the point of ZZ, and it is a big advantage if you actually see what ZZ is used for, and you don't think, oh, it's block building and it has fewer moves, so that's why it's good. No, that's not why it's good. Not at all. So all in all, I disagree. I don't think it's just worse than CFOP. I think it can be as good as CFOP, although I'd say it's pretty unclear, and it's something that has to be proven. I would love to see a few young talents pick up ZZ and try to prove the methods, the method, especially like EO cross ZBLL first of all, and get good with it, because we haven't had our Kian or our Alexander Lau yet. And I think ZZ really needs that to have a little bit of a breakthrough and bring up that share of ZZ users and then find its niche. Maybe if that happens, it kind of gets proven by having lots of solvers use ZZ that ZZ does not really compare to CFOP, and it's a little bit slower. Maybe it's just as fast, maybe it's a little bit faster, but that's the one thing. And then for one-handed, there's just no discussion. Like ZZ is just better than CFOP. How could CFOP ever be better than ZZ for one-handed? It's just no way. And then Rue's only better because table abuse exists. And yeah, I'm fucking salty about that. I'm really fucking salty, actually. Um, and yeah, and then there's feet. And feet, I have no idea how feet works, but if you say ZZ is the best method for feet, I don't know, sure. Let's prove that. Sounds fucking great. Uh, like, there's no problem in having a niche method, right? At some point, we will have only specialists getting the world records and really good rankings in the side events anyway. So people will definitely learn one method to do one special event. For example, ZZ is absolute crap for 4x4 because you want to use Yao. And Yao with ZZ is just, it doesn't work. So you do CFOP for 4x4. I also do CFOP for 4x4. I'm just not that great because I don't put the time into CFOP. And then ZZ is also pretty good for 5x5 upwards. There are some really nice ideas to make it work with the last two edges, like the edge pairing of the last two edges, and actually start solving the EO lane at the same time. Much, much, much better than the proposed 4x4 variants of ZZ that are basically all absolute garbage when compared to Yao. And then something that shouldn't be forgotten, because obviously feed is going to be removed, or, well, I suppose it's getting removed, but maybe someday we will have Team Blind as an official event. And I believe ZZ is actually the best method for Team Blind, especially because you have this like this reduction in number of possible cases that I talked about. You can basically give absolutely everything a name and a code in ZZ, and it becomes very, very easy to just have like standard solves called out in just a few words and be really fast with it. In fact, me and Christine Brichti have already been doing that. Like we have just given names to all the ZBLLs and are currently learning the names. We have already used ZZLL like this, and there are options to actually call the possible EO cases in inspection. So the solving person can plan out the entire EO after just 3 words that you say, no problem. And you can start the solve right away, and then you have no rotations in the F2L that you have to call out, and you have only a handful of F2L cases that you can also name. So ZZ for Teamlined, I guess it's the best, but then again for Teamlined we haven't had much development either way. All right, that's it from me. I guess that this video is also a ramble. I hope you enjoyed my points that I made, and I hope you can critically think about this thing and not just accept Jay's opinion, because I believe in the end it's not objective and measurable like he claims in the title. I think he still like gives very subjective values to the different pros and cons, and you can't really tell right now which is better. But yeah, that judgment is up to you now, and if you think ZZ might have some value, then pick up the method and prove it. Prove it, prove it, prove it. That's the only way to finally settle this discussion. Good night.